This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I currently still stay here. I grew up speaking Cantonese when I was a small child, but as soon as I hit school, there was a lot less Cantonese because, the education was then in English. I lost a big part of my heritage not being able to speak the language. Fourth generation in South Africa, my great-grandfather came. I really do feel that I am Chinese South African, and Chinese South African is very important. I'm South African, but I'm a Chinese person in South Africa. My father was held in high esteem by many top martial arts instructors in South Africa. Everyone knew who he was. It's quite a daunting thought, what sort of huge shoes those are to fill. You can say the Tai Chi is the Chinese martial art that we use to hold on to our heritage. For a very long time, especially post my divorce, I was in limbo. I didn't know who I was. And then I found my old drawing book. And the more I drew, the more I felt like I could get myself out of this hole, the more I felt I can accomplish something.
It's just a love story.
Yeah. I've been teaching martial arts for more than a decade and a half now. Martial arts for me is about sharing a culture, but ultimately also wanting to improve people's quality of life in terms of being physically healthier and mentally healthier. And I have a lot of joy in seeing how people develop in their martial career. Look at your left hand and up. And gradually open, stretch up to your fingertips. My father was held in high esteem by many top martial arts instructors in South Africa. Everyone knew who he was. I dare say one of the first people to have a multicultural martial arts school during apartheid.
I don't know every single dojo around, but I was definitely one of the first person to pioneer to everyone. It was actually quite a mixed race. In those days, whites weren't allowed to go into the location too. You can get arrested for that.
So this is my grandmother, my dad's mum, my mum's mum, my mum's grandmother. Being in South Africa as a Chinese person, sometimes you really don't feel like you belong because of the way people treat you, mocking your language or your name. I didn't think about it then, but speaking, if you can say, good English was definitely a way to try and survive a sort of a Western school. My parents had always encouraged my sister and myself to draw at a very young age. My father would play all these little games with us where he would maybe draw he would squiggle a line and then we need to make an image out of that.
Jardine's a funny name for a Chinese, but my grandfather's name is actually Jardine. When he came to South Africa, they asked him what's his name, and he said, my name is Jardine. So he became a surname instead. So that's how it got stuck with Jardine.
So in Chinese culture, you're generally sort of announce your surname first because they want to know what family you're from before your name. My Cantonese name is Liu Ginman. So, so I still, for most Chinese people who came to the country, we have our Western names, but we also still have our Chinese names that relates us back to our culture and, if you can say, our heritage. It was encouraged by my parents that, you need to find a career that's going to be stable. So I went and did actuarial science. I got accepted. I subsequently failed horribly in actuarial science. So I did applied mathematics, and also it just wasn't working for me. So after all of that, it was a bit of a difficult period for me mentally afterwards. And then I spoke to my father about the possibility of maybe helping him teach. And it was a grueling 6 years of training, if I can say, from my father. It was a tough relationship because you have this idea of father and son, and then teacher and student.
Look, he's always had quite a pleasant type personality, and that's what people say in school. They say that I'm too strict, whereas Lee's very approachable. He's much more likable, and that's fine because he's not me. I'm not him, so
I thought I would be an engineer maybe. No, I didn't think I would be pursuing the martial arts like he did. So I had been dating this young lady for 6 years, and we got married, and 3 years later it didn't work out, and I subsequently got divorced. I just fell, I dare say, into a very deep depression. Teaching the martial arts, I think it kept me from doing anything stupid, if you can say. And then I found my old drawing book, and I saw there was a drawing there that I hadn't finished since my early varsity days. So this was 2014. So it was a good 13 years prior to that I had started this drawing. Yeah, and I only had finished about maybe this much of the drawing. And then, in about 2014, I think this was the first drawing I decided that I'm going to finish. And then when I did, there was a small sense of accomplishment. And then the more I drew, the more I felt like I could get myself out of this hole. And then, I just thought, as I was carrying on drawing, what if I did something constructive with this? And I looked at the Wits School of Fine Art. When I first wanted to register, I said, oh no, because you did so badly in those initial years of university, you've actually been excluded from the Wits program. So I had to write a letter of motivation to get back in. Since then, I never looked back. I enrolled, and definitely the 4 most uplifting years of my life. Not easy, but definitely uplifting. I remember our first year, we all arrived here, there's about 60 of us. And then I just remember this man walking in again. And it's like I had no idea who he was. And he introduced himself as Professor Coronel. And he said he would be taking us for drawing. Yeah, and I suppose that's where everything in my life changed. Yeah.
I think come in through Liz's entrance. Thomas will open for you, and then just walk across the lawn and we'll meet you. Okay, see you, bye. I'm Carl Nell, and I'm awaiting Lee Jardine to arrive. We do keep in touch, but I haven't seen him for almost probably about a year.
Yeah, hello, my dear man.
How wonderful to see you. Oh, it's been too long. It's too long. Lovely, lovely.
I met Lee in my first year drawing course. He was very tall. He was a slightly older student, and with that, he brought with him an experience of life. And he soon sort of became really, in many ways, the keeper of the class.
There was something about Carl that had quite an incredible presence about him. And, you know, he didn't command any kind of respect, but, you know, when he spoke, everyone listened.
They are used in dance and in warfare, and is a ceremonial ads, which would have come from Swaziland, which has got this very beautiful form.
Gee, this is an interesting piece, Carl.
So that's from the Pacific. Again, it's a piece that would have been danced in almost like in a martial arts-like way.
It's like an ability to see the world for what it is and appreciate it for what it is. And Carl was always really amazing at that he found beauty in almost everything. He really opened my eyes, and all of a sudden, like it felt like I had transformed into like a sort of a different person. And then I remember Dorothy Kreutzfeldt, her head popping in the office, and that was an amazing interaction.
One day when I came to campus and to the department, I saw that Lee was having a meeting, or he was sitting in a meeting with our then head of department. It was nice because obviously it's a kind of a peculiar kind of reversal of roles, because he had been essentially my instructor, or Sifu, for a couple of years in Tai Chi. So the roles were reversed.
And these are some drawings I did in the Kruger. So this was my second year course. So what I would do, unfortunately, I only have these images here, but every time I would draw on the wall, and then I would react at a certain point in time on the wall. So I'd perform with my drawing. In this instance here especially, this is a typical Tai Chi straight sword form that I do. So you can see how I reacted. And I sort of made this spiral, and my feeling was of something carrying on forever.
It's the traces themselves that remain, but it's in the performance that something is in fact enacted. And so those movements, which are quite free-flowing, are actually quite beautiful in their abstraction, but also very, very evident in the repetition.
You get to a certain state of doing, and when you are completely involved in your doing, sometimes the time just disappears because you're just so focused on what you do. Sometimes it can feel like a lifetime, sometimes it can feel like an instant. It's quite an incredible way of thinking of meditation.
But for me, what was interesting is that it was starting to kind of manifest some of the maybe more Eastern ways of thinking around space, void, bodies, breath, and so on. And the fact that it wasn't sort of so obvious and so forced, that was interesting for me. So I think the growth is maybe one that reflects sort of a moment of really inhabiting, embodying, and running with a sense of one's own imagination, but also kind of finding one's own artistic voice.
These are all martial art training tools, okay? And I'd use that training to apply my my paint, if you can say, onto a surface. This is called a Congo Ken, and this is one of the a kind of object that I used to make paintings with as well, where I would have my paint or glue. I actually use glue and pigment mixed together to make the paint. So all of my work at the end of my fourth year was based on my martial art training. I remember going into first year, you know, I was mildly terrified about being one of the oldest people in the class. And I remember seeing this very shy little Chinese man, and eventually we became good friends. Shelton, how are you guys? Long time. Good to see you.
Likewise.
Hey, how's it going?
Very well. And yourself?
Yeah. Good. Okay.
This is the high school creative arts and visual art classroom. Yes, you know, teach, well, creative arts, what we used to call arts and culture back in.
And what, do you teach every medium?
No, it's mostly visual art.
So that's exciting. You got accepted into the Royal Academy of Arts in
Royal
London.
College.
Yeah,
College of Arts.
Royal College of Arts. But like, why do you paint things the way you do, and how?
Well, I try, well, from what you know, that I have been interested, you know, and fascinated with regards to, you know, various histories, you know, of art coming from various cultural backgrounds, you know, cultural heritages, being what we are, you know, as Chinese South Africans in South Africa. So we've, well, personally, we found ourselves influenced from many different directions. If you look at, you know, my mark making, they embody a kind of really calligraphic way of, you know, painting. Even, you know, when I squeeze the paint straight out of the tube, you know, it refers to a lot of direct marks. You know, when you're thinking about Chinese calligraphic writing or painting, it's a very direct, okay, and an immediate way of gaining a mark onto paper.
Like, I'm also really happy that you started teaching. I mean, you know, I remember when I started learning, teaching martial arts, I realized how much I didn't know, but I also realized that how much I can learn from my students. And that's always an amazing thing. Okay, so I was really stoked to hear you start teaching. I don't know if you know that I framed your palette. Yeah, so okay, that's one of my favorite things to look at every day. Okay.
Really, I think that means a lot to me on my side.
When you don't see someone for a long time, it's one of those things about seeing people develop. It made me really happy to see Shelton, you know, as being a mentor for people of young minds, you know, and he's influencing these young minds to be creative. So seeing Shelton in that new environment made me really happy. And you are such a workhorse. How long did it take you to do all of these?
With the art practice, I think it is a deeply internalized process, in that I have found that students who have come to study very often are trying to understand their place in society, and they're trying to understand themselves at the same time. And in Sheldon's painting, one has seen him negotiating both living in South Africa but being Chinese. And I think both he and Lee have had to find their way within the complicated history of this country in which they have grown up, which has affected all of us for many generations.
This is Shelton's palette that I acquired from fourth year. I framed up because I thought it was an absolutely stunning piece of work in itself. This is my second year photography work. It was montage that we all had to do. Okay. And then I used that to translate into a lino print. Okay. And this lino print, this is only a test print. I just kept it. I just like the way it looks even now. But I actually made the Sasol Top 100 signatures for this print. This is the Sasol New Signatures Top 100 works. Okay. Okay, so my work that I made Top 100 with was here. It's called Mindfulness. And the sucker for signed books. Okay, so this is signed by William Kentridge. President Mandela signed this book for me. This was our second project. Carl made us draw animal skulls. Okay. This is a rhinoceros skull. Okay. And then the hippo skull. This is the first skull I drew in charcoal. Carl always wanted us to see like us as a mechanical structure for who we are. Yeah, so this skull actually, funny enough, also became a reference for my printing practice during first year. And it prompted me to do some work in second year and then eventually into third year where I worked with the Evolutionary Studies Institute. I'm probably standing next to one of the most valuable, or probably the most valuable hominin fossil on Earth. This is the tongue child, and basically this fossil is evidence of humankind originating from Africa. And I remember at the end of first year, our class was invited to Carl Nell's house, and Carl has this incredible Alexis Preller painting.
So, this is my bedroom that I think it's a long time since
Yes, it has. Gee, I always forget how beautiful the Preller is.
It's a work called You'll Never Know, and he speaks about the skull as the architecture of consciousness, so that the skull, the cavity within the skull is where we perceive who we are, the world around us and the universe. So all this mental activity happens within that cave, within the mind. You know, it's been such a central piece in my life. You know, it's here in my bedroom. It's the first thing I see in the morning and the last thing. And you know, it is beautiful that it questions its nature of consciousness, but it also is a reminder of the temporal nature of life, as skulls always have been.
You know, when I think of it now, about where humans came from, it also got me thinking about where I come from. And I realized it was difficult to speak out about being discriminated in South Africa because we weren't white enough and then we weren't black enough. And it just felt like there wasn't a platform for us to speak. And it was through that made me realize, you know, it's really important for me to not forget also where I came from, which is why I am proud to be a Chinese South African, and Chinese South African is very important. I'm South African, but I'm a Chinese person in South Africa. I just remember after I finished my final exam in my fourth year, I had literally sat in my exam space and I had a good cry. You know, I couldn't believe that I had actually accomplished something by myself. I know Carl mentored me, but you know, ultimately it was my own path. But also after that, that's also where I met Gita. So Gita was a student of one of our other instructors, and I suppose,
I met you at a grading.
Yes, very
And you were
sort of
so
strict.
nervous.
Yeah, so I suppose I'd officially taken over my father's school, and it was sort of the first grading I was running without him supervising. And that's the first time I saw Gita. Nothing came about from that, though.
My whole family's in climate change or environmental work.
So I'm very lucky to have met like Gita, whose family is so active like that. So I suppose we both have been involved in the love for wildlife since kids.
Yeah.
You know, it was already inevitable that I would eventually take over. And my father and we had some conversations about that already.
Circle.
How big is the circle?
Cover your face. Cover your face on the...
You know, and I do remember that, you know, my father says ultimately you need to be yourself. No two people are the same, not even father and son. It has been something hard to come to grips with, you know, especially since when I took over the school. Many people who were his students are now people I need to take care of. And I'm very lucky they've been very accepting like that.
The important thing for him is that he must be proud of himself. Everybody's going to find their own way, like to look at their things in their way as well. So in many ways, like Shakespeare says, you know, oftentimes things are neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so.
There is such an enormous amount of discipline and knowledge embedded in these, you know, Tai Chi processes. He doesn't just teach it. When he teaches us, you know, it's also his energy in the room that actually makes the class what it is. So, and it makes complete sense that the degree that he was doing with us, the 4 years of study, would reconnect him with something that may have gone through its own kind of crisis and processes of questioning.
I think if one sees his involvement with Tai Chi and his own students and the transformative effect that has on people, it is just part of who he is, and that he has a kindness and a philosophical way of being in the world, which I think also comes from a deep background of his family. And of course, his Chinese ancestry, which has a great mental capacity, this capacity to work with the body in a philosophical way, and to be practically engaged in the world.
After I graduated, it made me realize that this degree actually made me find out who I really was again. You know, for a very long time, especially post my divorce, I was in limbo. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my goals were. I didn't know relationship-wise what would happen to me. In many ways, when I think of it now, this degree in fine arts very much saved my life in a lot of ways.
I don't know how I afford it.
A good teacher is someone who opens your eyes, and then you can, in your own way, see clearly what and how to go about your life in a positive manner.
They say when the student is ready, the master will appear.
And both my father and Carl played a big part in that for me. I still have your ideas in my mind.